Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning. Welcome to Ethical Perspectives in the News. My name is Pete Welch, and I'm your moderator for this morning's show. Today, we'd like to talk about a topic that everybody in Cedar Rapids has been able to see and observe, and now we'd like to talk about bicycle safety, what's going on in Cedar Rapids, and how everybody can look forward to what's going to happen on our streets, continue to happen, what we've been seeing happen, and going forward. First with us this morning is Sergeant Joshua McAlpin, who's with the Cedar Rapids Police Department. Good morning.
Thank you.
And also with us is Mr. Matt Myers, who is the Cedar Rapids Traffic Engineering Manager. Is that a smile I see, Matt?
It is.
It is.
Glad to be here.
Okay, and finally we have Mr. Mark Wyatt, who is the Executive Director of the Iowa Bicycle Coalition. Good morning.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay. First of all, our viewers and everybody in eastern Iowa has seen a huge transformation over the last couple of years, and most especially here in Cedar Rapids in the last year and a half, with the green bike lanes and redirecting traffic. Can you tell us a little bit what's going on? What's the big picture? What are we going to say? What's been happening and what's going to happen?
Well, this past summer, we definitely had the conversion of 2nd Avenue and 3rd Avenue into downtown from a one-way operation into two-way traffic, as well as just restriping into basically a two-lane road for 2nd and 3rd Avenue. And the reasons for that and the transformation and some of the background information behind that is there's been really a pretty big change in the number of cars that were using those roads. And so we had just really wide roads that really promoted high speed, weren't very conducive for pedestrians or bicycles. And so the projects that were undertaken was really just trying to transform those roads to kind of fit a more walkable community, fit in more what community values are for what that transportation should be, and kind of right sizing what the network should be, having the right lanes and such, instead of coming up to an intersection and not providing any space for a bike, or really if you wanted to go and walk safely even across those roads, that was also a part of why those roads were changed.
Well, when I was a young man here in the 50s, and I guess I'm dating myself, when they did those one-ways, the theory was to move cars through, time the lights together, so it didn't have to become a stop or an impediment, if you will, in getting through town. But now, do they want you to stay in downtown longer and stop? Is that kind of the thinking?
I think that having a low speed environment is really, we are looking for people who want to stay in the area and really look at that as being an inviting place to stay and shop and live. We have a number of housing units that are planned in the downtown area. And so this idea of non-motorized traffic, whether it's biking or walking, the downtown area is really transforming itself into an area where you can work, live, and play.
Okay. Mark, is that why people would be taking bikes as more common in that they don't have a commute from the edge of town, but they're living nearby and close to the downtown area?
I think that's part of it. I think also people want recreation. I think they want places to go. Even a sense of place, I think, is important in a community, and being able to experience it outside the car, I think, is one of those opportunities that presented itself in Cedar Rapids and a lot of different communities across the state. No doubt bicycling is on a big boom right now, and people are really getting out and enjoying it. And there's a lot of people with bicycles that it doesn't take much to get them out. The barrier to entry is pretty low to have a bicycle and be able to enjoy your community. And having the facilities there just increases that factor and brings more people out.
And certainly if it weren't recreation, it could be also fitness.
Absolutely.
Much more of a craze there. But we do tend to have a season here that they call it winter that tends to discourage some of this.
I think you're seeing more and more people bike even during the winter. I don't think that's really changing quite a bit. You're probably hearing demand for trails to get plowed and things like that because people are, don't want to take their car out in the winter and they can bike to work. I just bought a fat tire bike, and it's allowed me to bicycle over snow and ice and everything all winter long, and really kind of enjoyed everything to bike. And really, that snow and ice and things like that, it's a few days out of the season. The city's really good at clearing things out and making it easy to get around on the other days that it's dry.
And here I was thinking that was only a beer.
Yeah,
Right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Josh, what can you say, what's going on downtown? What concerns do the police have, or have they seen any changes, or people getting used to new rules, accidents, or up or down, or?
Well, the lanes were, I think they were completed in October, somewhere
Yes.
last year. So I think this summer and now spring will be the time that'll kind of tell where the confusion is. I think there will be some confusion just the way the bike lanes are laid out. The city's put out some information on their website that can help drivers and bicyclists both understand those lanes, as well as we're trying to train our officers in understanding the lanes also.
Is there going to be any city pattern that follows, like on the bridges where the courthouse is, there's angular parking, then there's a bike lane, and then there's the parking meters. And then when you get into the downtown, it's no longer angle parking, it's straight parking, the same way the traffic is. Is there any logic? I won't say logic. What's the plan going to be? Is it going to be one plan, or is it going to be varied?
Well, one of the safest bicycle facilities, and we've maybe speak to some of the experience with the other two people here, but separated bike lanes is just something that is probably the top tier for what people really love to have for a path. So a separated trail or a separated path where you don't have to worry about any vehicular traffic, that's definitely something that everybody really wants. And so that kind of separation from moving cars and a bicyclist when you're on the road, one of the objectives of what 3rd Avenue and why it looks like it does is we had so much room to use that we're using the parking to be that buffer between the bicyclist and a car moving by you. And so that was just a measure of convenience and comfort that was being offered to the bicycle trail for right in there. And that's just an opportunity that we had that we were able to do on 3rd Avenue. So many of our streets within Cedar Rapids, a typical installation is more likely going to be like 2 really 10-foot lanes, 2 5-foot bike lanes, and then maybe online or parallel parking that's on the street. For a local road, that's probably a very typical installation. You're going to see a lot of that probably being installed. The avenues are just so much wider, and we have so much more space to use and really consider buffer areas between just moving cars as they're coming up alongside a bicyclist, just to kind of give that extra measure of comfort. And so we took advantage of that on the 3rd Avenue bridge and going into downtown.
Okay. Now, if you're taking the bike trail and say you're coming down from North Cedar Rapids, Hiawatha, down to the downtown area, and then you come out by Quaker Oats, you're no longer going to have a dedicated trail. You're going to have sidewalks, street crossings, and a lot more activity. Is there any better way to do that through the downtown?
There's always better ways to do it, and the tough part's in context. I mean, you have neighborhoods and blocks that were built and rebuilt during different decades, and things were different philosophies, and things don't all wear out at the same time, so we don't have the convenience to tear up the entire city and redo it all at the same time. So there's always going to be some context in that. I think the big key is to be able to give people options. Can they get from point A to point B by walking and bicycling, or by car or transit? And then, what's the safest way to do it? How do we make people aware that there's other users on the road and make sure that we all can get along that way?
Josh, has there been any significant increase in bicycle crashes so far that you've been able to note?
No, not thus far. Like I said, this summer probably will be a little bit more telling because the major changes took place in the fall of last year.
Okay, so it's this summer, the story's yet to be told.
As far as for downtown, I would say
Okay.
yes.
Now, there are a lot of problems, and maybe you could tell us what are the problems the bicyclists have. Number one is a lot of them stop and they think their helmet that's the extent they have to do for safety.
Sure, sure.
But yet there's a lot of other things that they should be doing too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you look at this crash statistics from a statewide perspective, because there's a lot of contributing factors both on the bicyclist end and the motorist end. And a lot of times on the motorist end, it's failure to yield, and sometimes that's just awareness that they weren't sure that the bicycle's there. Oftentimes when you have a crash between two parties, it takes both parties in a lot of those crashes, but sometimes they're just unavoidable, and people have those collisions. So it's there's just that finding that awareness and on the motorist end, and then on the bicyclist end, also trying to create facilities that make it easy to follow the law. I think that's one of the tough parts with bicyclists is there's some areas where they kind of have to make up their own path because the roads and the streets and the sidewalks don't all connect, and that just lends to more confusion and that sort of thing. So if we can do more to educate bicyclists, especially kids, that's maybe some of our biggest problems. A lot of these crashes involve kids, and trying to teach them and educate them and have them understand the traffic laws are important.
Possibly kids because they're acting in a immature manner, haven't had the experience.
Yeah, or don't have the cognitive ability. I think that's one of the things. The University of Iowa is doing some driver simulator studies right now that are looking at, do kids have the ability to judge traffic scenarios? Can they figure out how far a gap is in between cars and make the decision to cross properly? Kids at the younger ages don't always have that cognitive ability to understand the traffic rules. And they're definitely not experienced drivers. They're under 16 years old. They've never been behind a wheel before. So a lot of times the bicycle is their first experience in traffic.
That might account for why when I go down the street and the young people walk out into any part of the block, it's always the ones that have the droopy pants.
Yeah, sometimes.
Now, inattention is a key here. What are the rules about everybody that's walking down the street and they got earphones to their phone or whatever? What are they driving and riding?
As far as riding, if you're talking riding on a sidewalk.
Well, if you're driving a car, you're not supposed to be
Correct.
sitting there and having earphones in
Sure.
so that you couldn't hear an emergency vehicle.
Sure.
So people may not realize that that's actually against the law, isn't it?
When you're driving, there's some laws in place for that. When you're riding a bike, no, there's no laws that are in place. There is safety recommendations out there, and as long as you follow those safety recommendations, you're going to be a lot better off. But that's something you have to seek out and also learn.
Okay, is that something that the Bike Coalition would agree with if they passed a law and said if attention is a problem and you're going to be putting plugs in your ears and riding the bike, then you need to do like they do when they drive a car?
I think there's already a legal kind of doctrine of personal responsibility and lookout. So you have to operate. You can't arbitrarily go and crash into things and have it be a problem for the other party. So you as the operator need to have that situational awareness. Some people can do that with headphones and some people cannot do that with headphones. I think you have the same opportunities with driving. You flip the air conditioner up, turn the radio up, and have your cell phone in your hand. You may not have that same situational awareness either. So I think it's a societal-wide problem. I don't think it's necessarily a biker or car sort of thing. I think everybody has that.
A good friend of mine was out doing his exercising and on a bike path down in Texas, and he thought he was safe. And it was a 14-year-old on a bicycle that was texting, of all things. Took him out, and he had rotator cuff surgery.
Sure.
So, it's part of that is being responsible.
Yeah.
Be a responsible driver. Be a responsible rider.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and I think that's the issue is that, we need to be aware for everybody else on the road. I think that's important. We need to keep our heads up and try to avoid getting in crashes at all points. We can do that with enforcement, making sure that the rules are followed. We can do that with engineering, making sure that we got great facilities that make it easy to enforce the law. And then we can do that with personal responsibility. So I think we all have a role to play in this, in getting bikes on the road and everybody being safe.
We had something interesting last week that kind of fits into this subject. We had somebody that submitted their bike video, their helmet video. So they had a camera on their helmet and they were going down a road, and their statistics were actually on the screen. The bicyclist was going about 30 miles an hour. It was, a 45-mile-an-hour posted road, and there was a pickup driver, who was stopped at the stop sign, and he was just stopped, and it was a flat road, and they were just going along, and they emailed us the video because the pickup driver, he just left, he just pulled out in front of the bicycles, and you could hear the brake squeal and everything on this video, and they had to swerve to keep from hitting the pickup, and you just watch that, and you really ask yourself, I'm not sure what we could have done with signing or anything to actually prevent that. It was really the bicyclist that was just aware of what was going on and not trusting what was going to happen, and they just pulled out. And you don't know if they were distracted, or maybe the pickup driver was looking so farther up the road because it was a high-speed highway. But it's interesting that we got this video, and you could see the whole thing play out in front of you. And everything that we were talking about, distractions, the grade of the road, what kind of traffic control, you can kind of see it and kind of think through if you could have really made any more difference. And I'm not sure we really could actually made it any better, any safer. It is one of those things that would just happen, but I kind of anticipate we'll see more and more of those kind of videos where something happened and a close call, and somebody submits it to us and asks us what we think, if there's something else that we could do to help with the situation.
And I think there's a certain amount of that where the driver says, if you're not bigger than I am, then I don't have to pay as much attention to you. And that certainly goes on with the car and motorcycle accidents, where the motorcycle rider and company bears the brunt of the damage. And a bicyclist, I've never heard of a car not being able to drive away from a collision with a bicyclist.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the sad facts, that the consequences are always severe when you have a collision like that.
Okay. Now, without going into department policy, do policemen have the power to write tickets for bicyclists too? For example, when one of the biggest things that bicyclists do to incur the wrath of drivers is they ignore traffic signals and signs, where you may have a whole bunch of cars obeying the red light, and the bicyclist is coming, gawks both ways, see there's nobody on the cross street, and whoosh, they run the red light. Now, is that a ticketable offense?
Yes, they can be cited for that. When bicyclists are operating on the roadway, they need to follow the laws of the roadway.
Of the other moving vehicles,
Correct.
just like, and they are considered in the same. They can't speed.
Correct.
They can't run red lights and other things.
They have to yield to all traffic, follow all the traffic laws just like a vehicle would.
But it's really interesting, and this is kind of a myth and reality sort of thing, is that when we looked at the crashes, the contributing factors for bicyclists in crashes where they run a traffic signal or not obey a traffic sign is about 10% of the contributing factors. For motor vehicles, it was upwards about 28%, so almost 3 times the amount of time the motorists ran the crashes and ran a stop sign or a traffic signal, and that contributed to the cause of the bicyclists. Now, I also think there's some overlap there. I think there are some crashes where both had failure to yield. But it's just kind of interesting that bicyclists do get that kind of nod, and we're notorious for having issues with stop signs and signals. But on the other hand, motorists also do it too.
We have, I want to point out too that, so at traffic signals, we have something that we call detectors. And so when a vehicle pulls up to a signal, there's quite a few signals within Cedar Rapids that have either like video or loops in the pavement, or even like radar that are used to detect cars. And we haven't really pursued what I would call bicycle detection system-wide within the city. And that's something we're really starting to talk about, seeing about implementing that. So they would get a green light just like a car would. So if we have a separate bike path that's coming up to a signal, for the most part, there's always enough cars that they drive the red, yellow, greens, and so the bicycles can just kind of go with the timing. But we're starting to look into what it would take to actually detect for a bicycle, so they are more accommodated within the signal timing and get the green lights like they should, like any other transport vehicle on the road.
Okay. What the thing then, and I clearly like to get out and ride my bike, but the thing that always just scares the bejesus out of me is when I'm going by a row of parked cars and I'm thinking somebody up there is going to open up one of those doors on me, and I'm going to eat one of those door jams. What about that?
It can be tremendously disfiguring and even cause death. We've seen that in communities. it's important from the bicyclist perspective to keep that lookout, to make sure that you're far enough away out of the door zone. So sometimes that means you need to ride further into traffic than next to parked cars. And you should be scanning the whole time, making sure that you don't see somebody moving in the car that might open the door. From a motorist perspective, you need to check your mirror before you open the door. It's the same if moving traffic was coming by at the same time. You have a responsibility to make sure that you don't throw that door into somebody else's path and potentially kill them. That's what we don't want to see.
And even as a regular car driver, many times we're pulling onto a freeway and we know that you can check your mirror, but there's still blind spots there.
Of course.
And so unless you do, a double angle, you're still going to have a blind spot, and that's certainly a cause of car crashes. Mm-hmm. So something to look forward in the future. As far as the attention span, we're talking not just the driver of cars, but we're talking also the bike rider too. Mm-hmm. Has there been anything that that, like the differences in day-night crashes?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's not a lot of nighttime crashes. It doesn't happen quite a bit. In Iowa, you have to have a white light on the front of your bicycle, and either a red reflector or a red light that's rear facing. Yeah. And that's the requirement. We don't have a lot of data on nighttime crashes. They don't. Most bicycling is going to happen during the daytime. They're more of an urban area problem than a rural area problem. People don't bike out in the middle of nowhere to go visit that really nice county town. You're kind of keeping nearby. But as we see more people bicycle, there's people that bike to their third shift jobs. There's people that come home early in the morning, and there are definitely low light situations where that can have tremendous consequences. We had one crash in the Okoboji area last year where a young woman, 21 years old, coming home from her night shift job, didn't have lights and was wearing dark clothing and hit from behind on a busy highway. So bicyclists, we do have some work that we can do to kind of improve our visibility at night and that sort of thing. But it's also important to keep a proper lookout because that's important. Bicycling, is incredibly safe. These crashes don't happen very often. We have about 5 fatal crashes a year, about 400 crashes total. Compared to motor vehicles, there's been 400 fatalities in about every year for the past several years, I believe, and that's a much higher consequence than it is for riding your bike. So.
Well, one of the reasons I was interested in doing the show was I had a very close friend who was the Boone County Veterans Director, and he was a retired Marine Corps colonel, served with me in Russia, Poland, and overseas in some dangerous roles, and he's riding to work one morning and he gets run down and killed. Mm-hmm. And it was on a rural road, and he was commuting to work, and they never proved anything, but the speculation is the person that ran him down was texting.
Yeah. We've had a tremendous problem with fatal crashes happening in rural areas where the motorist was hit from behind. About 50% of the fatal crashes over the past 10 years have been overtaking type crashes. Predominantly in rural areas. That doesn't happen as much in the urban areas. It's usually an intersection type crash where two places are crossing at once or that sort of thing. So it's a concern. We've been working with the legislature over the past several sessions to get either a safe passing clearance, which hasn't moved anywhere. Last year we moved a bill out of the Iowa Senate to change lanes to pass bicycles, to make it crystal clear in the instruction that you have to be in the opposite lane if you're going to pass a bicyclist. And that didn't move through the House either, so we're going to continue to push on that. We just did about $20,000 in radio advertisements to get motorists aware. So we kind of blanketed the state with change lanes to pass advertisements and made sure people know that there's bicyclists out there.
If our viewers wanted to find out, what's going on, how to speak to their legislators, or is there a web page where you talk about
Sure.
advocacy for for biking and doing those programs?
IowaBicycleCoalition.org is our website, or you can Facebook us at Iowa Bicycle Coalition. And we have different sections of the website, one for bicycle safety, one for traffic safety, and all kinds of action alerts and things like that that go on the website.
Okay, Matt, and people here in the Cedar Rapids interested in feeding back for you and the city's purposes, how would they be doing that? How could they get that message to you?
Well, they can certainly email me directly.
I'm not asking for your phone number. I don't want them disturbing your dinner.
We'll come back to that. That is part of my job. I do get quite a few emails and phone calls, but they can certainly email. That's probably the best way. So it's, m.myers, M-Y-E-R-S, at cedar-rapids.org. And if you go into the city's website and you look for traffic through the Public Works section, there's a generic traffic email that a lot of people use to give us feedback on biking as well. There's the Bike CR committee, and so there's, you can go through the website and look and see what they're doing, because they look at infrastructure and things like that directly related to bikes as well.
And they're doing the prioritization for where they want to get their bike paths in, aren't they? And they're coordinating with you when they start touching on the city.
Yes,
and
doing that, as well as even just looking at how we actually construct things. They're looking at our standards and just how our configuration for bicycle facilities are. We get quite a bit of feedback from them.
And then the statewide organization, you're dealing not only with the cities, the towns, the counties,
The DOT,
and DOT is the kingpin overall, or overmost.
Yeah, for the most part. And I should pay compliment to Cedar Rapids, because they have done a tremendous job. And since 2008, since the floods, this has been a big priority for the city, is to make their neighborhoods more connected and more livable. And I think that's something that deserves some big applause in this community.
I know somebody's been taking vows for it, so I see we were up for some award or something for friendly biking.
The League of Bicycle. Yes, definitely. We got a report card is what I would call it, and on quite a few things. And so they rank a community, and you go from like gold, silver, bronze, you go all the way up to diamond, and diamond is very difficult to get. But we rank pretty well, like on enforcement and education, in terms of like a gold status. We rank pretty well in a few other categories, silver status for things like encouragement and such. You're right, you kind of started off talking about our winners, and so ridership is something that we continue to see improve, and that's probably the biggest area. And it depends on how they measure it. They use a lot of census data to measure us, and I'm not sure that's the best way to capture our ridership, because if you come down to Newbo on a weekend and you see 20 bicycles outside of the establishments that are down in Newbo, I don't know if they're really capturing just how much bicycling is happening in this area, but it's really seeing tremendous growth.
There's a hell of a lot of people bicycling to their Sunday brunch. Josh, what about the city? What's the city going to do in the short term? Continue to work on education, identification?
I would say education is a big thing, both the drivers and the bicyclists, working with engineering here, and then also educating our officers to make sure they understand those rules, at least in the downtown area. So.
Are they going to be able to possibly take, and if they see people offending some of the rules, take them aside and say, this is a warning, we want you to get going?
Sure, it'll be an outreach type position at this point in time.
Well, I'd like to thank all three of you for joining me this morning. We've run this about as long as we can, and I want to thank you. And to our viewers today, go out there and enjoy Cedar Rapids and make it a happier, safer place to live, work, and bike. Thank you for joining us this morning.